Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to another reading vlog. I have a couple of arcs I want to get to for February, and one's kind of at the start of the month, and one's at the end of the month, in terms of release date. So I figured I would aim for somewhere in the middle, getting them both read and getting this vlog up as a sort of review for both of them. So that is the plan. And the two that we have to talk about are going to be Greedy by Callie Kazumi, which is about an expat in Tokyo who is, British expat, I should say, in Tokyo, who is in significant debt with the Yakuza, and he takes on a kind of sketchy job as a private chef for a reclusive socialite to try and get himself out of the situation, and it sounds like things are going to kind of spiral out of his control from there. So I am starting this one first. This is the one that comes out on the 3rd, which is today. So I'm a little behind, but that one we'll be tackling first, and I've already started it, so we'll come back to that in a second. But the other one we're going to be reading is The Red Winter by Cameron Sullivan, and this one is a dark, queer, historical fantasy about the Beast of Gavaudan, which is this really interesting little bit of history where there was some sort of creature that was, like, terrorizing the French countryside for, like, 2 years in the middle of the 18th century. And they still, to this day, don't really know what it was. There were all of these different eyewitness accounts, and no one described it as quite the same. But there's all these different theories about what the beast might have been, which I just think is really interesting. So I'm really curious to see what the author is going to do with that premise. I know there's also, like, a demon-possessed monster hunter and an estranged former lover, and it sounds like it's just going to be really creepy and really exciting, so I'm excited to dive into that one. So that's what we're going to be reading, and we'll return now to Greedy, because I have read about 30% of this book so far, and I am really enjoying it. We're following Ed Cook, who, as I said, has this, like, significant debt with the Yakuza, and he is trying to get out of the situation because he's worried about what will happen to his family if he is killed by the Yakuza for not paying his debts, because he knows the Yakuza will just go after them for the money if he isn't able to pay it off. He also has a strained relationship with his family because of his unemployment. So it's set just after COVID, or in, like, a couple of years right after COVID, or after the kind of initial wave of the pandemic ended. And so he was laid off during the pandemic and has now struggled to get back on his feet, and it's creating this, like, rising tension within his family. And that's the other kind of motivation that he has. And I really like the way that that's set up, because I feel like the book is doing a good job of convincing me that Ed is in really dire straits, because otherwise I'd be really frustrated with him for, like, ignoring all of the red flags that are cropping up with the job that he's taking on. The beginning of the book sees him applying and interviewing for the job, and the job has, like, a practical interview where he has to go in for a couple of days to prove that he can do what he says he can do. And it's also when he kind of, like, meets the employer, and there's just all of this, like, sketchy stuff happening when he first meets her that, like, I get why he's overlooking that. If it wasn't for the, like, setup at the beginning that establishes for me that Ed is in this, like, really terrible situation and that he really, really needs the money, I feel like I'd be less on board for it. But I feel like the book has done a great job of explaining why he's willing to overlook those things. So I am enjoying it so far. I think that the employer character is kind of creepy, but she's also really interesting. She's a character I feel like you can really easily find yourself empathizing with, but she's also really unsettling, so I'm enjoying her character. Ed is interesting because he's constantly kind of torn between his feelings on different people. Like, he loves his wife, he loves his daughter, he wants to be able to take care of them, and he, like, values his wife's experiences and her, like, perspective on life, but he also kind of hates her because of the way she's treated him while he's unemployed. She's been really harsh and critical, and he finds that he's kind of resenting her for that, and he also struggles with not feeling paternal, like, instincts towards his daughter. He kind of, like, spends time with her, but he's not really convinced that he feels like a father, and so I feel like that's a really interesting dynamic within his family. And then he also has this interesting dynamic with his new employer where he's kind of fascinated by her and very much envious of her wealth and luxury, but also he's kind of disgusted by her and the waste implied by her lifestyle. So I'm really enjoying following these characters. I'm excited to see where the book is going. The description makes me think it has to be a cannibalism book. Like, it has to be, right? Like, private chef or reclusive socialite and things get bad. It's gotta be cannibalism, right? I don't know if that's where we're going. That is my guess at this stage, and I feel like it has to be right. But we'll kind of see where it goes. That said, even with that guess, I really have no sense of what direction the story is going. Where I'm at, Ed has just like officially gotten the job, so things are really kicking off now, and I'm excited to continue reading and see where things are going to end up for Ed, because I suspect it's not going to be good. So that said, I'm going to go try and get some more read tonight, and I'll check back in later, probably around 50% or so, and let you know how things are going. I finished Greedy yesterday, and I felt like I needed a little bit of time to think about the book and decide how I was feeling about it before I filmed an update again. And I will say that the middle portion of the book really grabbed my attention, as might be clear by the fact that there was no update after 30%. I really meant to come back around 50 to 70% and talk about it, but it just didn't happen because I was completely sucked in and I wanted to know what was going to happen. But ultimately this book was a bit of a mixed bag for me. So I'm giving it 3.5 stars because it was really exciting. It did really keep my interest for the middle portion of the book, but I think it had a couple of things that brought the rating down for me. The first of which is just the writing was a little bit clunky. It's overly wordy in a way that's not like flowery or descriptive. It's overly wordy in a way where it needed like one more round of editing, and it really needed like a line editor to come in and just get rid of some of the like extraneous description, because everything had to have like a really like drawn out description. Like even Ed pulling something out of his bag had to have like a drawn out description. And I feel like that was kind of slowing down the pace of reading, particularly in the first 30%. I also think that the dialogue was a little bit clunky. It was a little bit unnatural, the way that the characters spoke to each other. So those things overall kind of dented my enjoyment, but if it was just the writing alone, I probably would have given this like 4 to 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed a lot of it. But what brought my rating down a lot was the ending. I'm getting ahead of myself here. And the ending was what really brought the rating down, because I think it's pretty clear from the beginning what the like sinister thing going on in this book is. You kind of, as the reader, I think, get a sense of what that is very early on, and it just takes Ed a very long time to get there. We don't get a revelation until like 85%, and it feels throughout the book like Ed is putting together the pieces. He keeps like getting these little clues of what's going on, and it feels like he's putting those together and starting to get unsettled by what's happening. And then it's not Ed like figuring things out that gives us the revelation in the end. It's Hazeline sitting him down and being like, okay, Ed, what's happening? You know what's happening. Figure it out, buddy. And it's a really extended conversation, multiple pages long. And I just found that was really awkward feeling after Ed spent all of this time kind of gathering clues. So I didn't really love the way that was handled. And then the ending itself is just really abrupt. I feel like it's building up all of these themes, and then the ending just kind of drops the ball. The ending just ends. I don't think it really concludes anything. The book just stops happening. And then there's an epilogue that doesn't really add any like clarifying information. It does reveal an extra twist that I had guessed early in the book, so I felt very clever for that, but it doesn't really help conclude or like wrap up any of the themes or anything. So, at least for me as a reader, it just did not work. This was very much a mixed bag for me, which I was sad about because I did really enjoy the middle portions of the book. I really liked the friendships that Ed was building with the other staff members and the relationship he was building with Hazeline. I liked that there was this complexity to the situation where it's not just all like sinister stuff and red flags. There's also this layer of like positivity to it where the job is unsettling in a lot of ways, but also the job is allowing Ed to start processing his feelings about being a father and a husband. It's allowing Ed to start rebuilding the relationship and repairing the relationship he has with his wife. He's starting to address his gambling addiction and really realize that he needs help. So there's like all of these interesting positive things that come out of Ed's situation with this sketchy job, but there's also like the sinister stuff happening as well. So I really liked the blend. I liked that Hazeline, as the sort of main antagonist, isn't really, like, she's sinister, but she's not evil in a lot of ways. She's evil, but, like, she's not one-note evil. She is not a capital V villain. She is, like, this weird, complex character who is doing horrible things, but also cares about the fact that healthcare is unaffordable, who, like, loved her husband deeply and when he passed, was like, okay, well, I have all this equipment. How do I help somebody else with it? So, like, she's doing good in the world in these, like, very small individual ways, but also she's really sinister and creepy, and she's doing some really heinous things as well. So it's a really interesting combination, and that was why I really enjoyed the middle part of the book. It's just that kind of, I think, all gets let down by a kind of flat, unsatisfying ending. So overall, Greedy I would still recommend if you think that the premise sounds interesting. I just don't think it totally worked for me as a reader. And then once I finished Greedy, I also started The Red Winter, which was a very, like, stark difference to me because the writing in The Red Winter is really good. And I think that maybe just jumped out to me more because I was coming from a book that was a little bit clunkier. But I am really enjoying The Red Winter so far. I'm not very far in. I'm on, like, chapter 3 or 4. But I really like our main character. I like the frame narrative that we get. So the concept of the book is that we're following Sebastian Grave, who's a monster hunter. He is also possessed by a demon, so he and his demon work together, and he's immortal. So he has been living for like hundreds and hundreds of years. But in the 18th century, he fought the Beast of Govaudan, and some sort of thing happened. He had a lover in the region that he was working with to fight the beast. Some sort of thing happened, and there's like an unresolved tension there, but they defeated the beast, and now 20 years have passed, and he gets a letter from that former lover telling him that the beast has returned and the Red Winter is happening again, and requesting that Sebastian return to, like, fulfill the original contract, which is to kill the Beast of Govaudan. And so he's like, is the beast really back? Is something else going on? And he feels like he can't really leave it. He needs to know what's happening. So he is headed back to Govaudan to deal with that situation. And that's pretty much where I'm at. Like, at the very early part of the book is just him getting that information and then going, okay, I need to go back and, like, find out what's happening. I really like, though, the main character. I like Sebastian. I think he's a fun character to follow. I think it's fun to follow, sort of like in the way that Geralt in the Witcher books is, like, a monster hunter in his prime. I really like following someone who is, like, a monster hunter who is well established in their career. So I'm really enjoying Sebastian as a character. I think that he has got a really interesting, like, character voice to him as well. And there's this interesting frame narrative where the story is being written by Sebastian, like, 200 years later. So the events happen in the late 18th century, but he's writing about them in 2013 because he happened to, like, go through his attic and find some of his old belongings from that time period and go, oh yeah, I should write that down. And I really am enjoying that frame narrative. I think it helps. Helps is not the right word. I think it makes it make sense that we have slightly modern feeling dialogue and description, but it's not, like, entirely modern either. There's, like, this interesting blend between older language and newer, but it's like someone writing about the 18th century from a 21st century perspective. I feel like that works really well, and I'm enjoying that conceit of the book. And there's some little funny footnotes, too, that are kind of playing on that in a way that I think is interesting. There's, like, a bit where he's talking about something, and he's like, but I wrote about that. There's, like, a footnote that's like, I wrote about that extensively, and you can check out that book, which is available on my website. And he's like, that's the footnote on something he's telling you about things that happened in the 18th century. So I'm finding that really enjoyable, and I also really like the side characters we've met so far. I've met Sarmadel, who is the demon possessing Sebastian. We've also met Livia, who is sort of like his housekeeper and assistant, and she's a succubus, and she's really interesting, and I'm excited to see where the book is going. I'm having a good time. I'm, like, super early in the narrative, but I'm immediately pulled in by both the writing and the storyline that's being set up and the world that's being created. So I am very excited to continue forward with this one, and I don't know if I will remember to update in the middle because I'm probably going to be just, like, devouring this book, but I'm going to try to remember to come back with some thoughts when I get a little bit further in. So we'll see how I feel about it once I get out of that initial, like, eagerness to continue, because this book has just, like, immediately kind of grabbed my attention, and I'm very excited to continue on with it. I am just shy of the halfway point in The Red Winter, and I just wanted to pop in and update on it because I'm having such a good time with it. It's turned out to be a multi-timeline story, so we're following Sebastian. 2013 Sebastian is writing about 1785 or 1786 Sebastian learning about the return of the Beast of Govaudan and traveling back to the region to try and figure out what's going on. And then 1785 or 86 Sebastian is further telling another character about the original Red Winter when the Beast of Gavaudan first appeared. So he's telling that story from like the 1760s to another character. And then there's a side character who is writing a supplement to the story that takes place in the 1400s and revolves around kind of initially Joan of Arc. And so we have this sort of multi-timeline thing where we're seeing all of these little elements of a mystery kind of get pulled together and figuring out what all these different little moments in time across Sebastian's life are meaning for the kind of current story at hand of the second Red Winter, the return of the Beast of Gavaudan. And I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. I'm still really liking Sebastian as a main character. I really like that as a monster hunter, he's not like a cynical, jaded kind of character. He's somebody who's constantly finding, like, joy and delight in the world. He's also just, like, very good at what he does, not because he is, like, particularly gifted in any way, but just because he has a significant amount of experience doing that, because by the time we meet him, he's already hundreds of years old, and he also has Sarmadel helping him, so he has, like, this additional kind of arcane input happening because of the demon that is possessing his body. So there's so many elements of this I'm liking. It's just a great Monster Hunter story. I really like the emotional depth that it's creating for Sebastian and his relationships with the other characters, and I'm really excited to see where this is going to go, because we have a sense now of, like, what the beast is and why it's significant. I've gotten to a point in the sort of second layer deep timeline of 1760s Gavaudan, where we know what... Sorry, still dealing with the cough. Where we know sort of what the beast is, somewhat, but we're not really sure why the beast is doing what it's doing, or, like, how all of this came to be. So, I'm just having a great time. There's also, like, all of these other pieces getting pulled in with different entities that are really significant. It's taking place in the 1700s in France, so obviously Catholicism is really big at this moment, and there's a pretty significant element that is about the Catholic God and about, like, the archangels, so I'm really finding that interesting, and I'm just enjoying the way all these pieces are getting pulled together. Plus, the writing is just continuing to be delightful. It's really, really descriptive, but not in a way that I feel like drags the pace down or anything. It's not flowery. It's just really vibrant and really interesting descriptions of the world and of the characters, and I'm just having a great time with it. That's pretty much the update. The Red Winter is an easy 5 stars. Hands down. Easy 5 stars. I finished it during my lunch break today, and it had me ugly sobbing at my desk for a good 10 minutes when I was done. I actually had to get up and, like, go take a walk to recover enough to come back and film this update before I start working again. Yeah, that was a lot. I had so much fun with this book. We have adventure, we have monster hunting, we have a doomed romance, and that's not, like, a spoiler. It's told to you in the first couple of pages of the book. It's clear that something horrible has happened. But the doomed romance, I think, is developed so interestingly across the course of the book, and it really just was, like, heart-wrenching, and I felt like it was just really cleverly written. We also have a morally gray protagonist who I think is really easy to root for, even though we see him do horrible things. He's somebody who is, like, he's done terrible things, he's done really great things. Ultimately, he seems generally guided by a sense of compassion and wonder for the world around him and for the people around him. He seems to genuinely want to do good for people. Ultimately, this leads him to a lot of trouble at various points, and sometimes leads him into doing things that are really horrific. So I think there's this really interesting balance that Cameron Sullivan is striking with Sebastian Grave. He's just this really fascinating character to follow, because it's like, even when he's doing horrible things, you kind of understand how he's ended up in this position, or if it's something that he's not intending to do, but it kind of happens, you kind of feel bad for him, but you also feel bad for the people who are suffering as a result of what he's doing, and at various points you also see him go out of his way to help people, even when it hurts his own self-interest. I just think he's a really interesting character, because he's selfish, but he's also selfless, and I think it was really interesting to see how those kind of warring sides of him compete throughout the story, and how they impact how he interacts with other people and how he approaches different problems throughout the story. I also really liked the structure of this book, because we have 3 timelines that are all slowly giving us different pieces of the mystery. We have the kind of I would call it the main timeline, that is the events where he is returning to Gavaudan 20 years after the original Red Winter to try and figure out whether the beast is truly back. But we also have the original Red Winter, the original hunt for the beast, and his involvement in that. And then we go back even further to a timeline in the 15th century that kind of lays the foundation for one of the central conflicts of the story. So I really enjoyed this. I felt like the timelines were balanced really well. I was having great fun with all of the timelines, but they did this kind of careful dance between them where at every point you're gaining some new information. So even if like time is passing slowly in one of the timelines, it never feels like it's dragging at any point, because you're bouncing around to these different points in time and getting different pieces of the puzzle and connecting all of these different things. So it just keeps the pace moving really quickly throughout the story. And I found that I was really reading this quite quickly. It's been a while since I started it because I have been really in a video game mood. That's where my time has been going. But every time I pick this book up, I would just like devour entire sections of it without really realizing how quickly I was reading it. It's really, I think, faster paced than I was anticipating, and just really cool. I think that all of the twists that we get are, like, the clues are there. They're fair twists. It's not something where you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. That came out of nowhere. Because there's quite a lot of twists. The book never goes in the direction that I think it was going. I think for one of the timelines, I'd be like, oh, I kind of understand where we're headed here. And then something would change entirely and it would go in a completely different direction. And so I found that like every aspect of the book was keeping me on my toes. I never quite knew what to expect, or when I thought I was expecting something, I would turn out to be wrong or like partially right, but then there was another side to it that I hadn't seen. But everything that happened, every twist, you could see the foundations clearly. You could see where the author had kind of put those breadcrumbs to let those things line up to have that twist happen. And so I felt like the whole thing was just really well constructed. The writing is fantastic. I love the characters. I was really invested in them, and it took me a long time to read the end of the book because I was so stressed for them. I kept like reading up a couple of pages and then putting it down because I was so stressed about what was going to happen. Yeah, whole thing is fantastic. Also, interestingly enough, I think that this book is doing some things with themes around like greed and hunger and power that are reminiscent of what Greedy was trying to do, and I think the Red Winter achieves them a lot better, because a lot of the book is about like abuse of power and people kind of stealing from each other to make themselves stronger. So I felt like that was a really interesting connection between those two, since I read them around the same time. They're very different in premise, but I think ultimately have some shared themes, some shared ideas, and I really enjoyed that. It was a really great reading experience, and I'm so glad that I finally got to it. I actually ended up pre-ordering a copy for myself because I know this is something I'm going to want to have on my shelves. I'm probably going to reread it at some point down the road, and yeah. It was just great. So that's really all I have for you today. Those are the two arcs I read. Greedy was, I think I gave it 3.5 stars, and then Red Winter, easy 5 stars. What a start to my reading journey for the year, because I have not read anything prior to these two books. These are the way I'm starting off my 2026. So it's been an interesting experience, and I'm really glad that I took the time to vlog it. And hopefully you enjoyed this vlog. If you did, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting at least once a week, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.